The sun crawled low across the bone-dry plains, dragging long shadows over the earth like a hand smoothing the past. Dust curled from the hooves of a mule-drawn cart as it limped into the dying light, its wood groaning, its canvas stained by distance and hard miles. Inside the general store, the rancher stood silent, shoulders hunched beneath his sheepskin coat. He weighed a sack of beans in one hand and a tin of tobacco in the other, neither seeming urgent enough to buy, but both too familiar to leave behind. He hadn't spoken more than 10 words all day. He rarely did any more. Language had grown brittle in his mouth over the years, cracking when used. The world had shrunk to the rhythm of chores and the silence between footfalls. But something about that evening felt different. The wind carried a warning, a pressure, heavy and restless, like thunder trapped beneath the dirt. When the wagon stopped outside, he noticed the mule first, ribs like drawn blades beneath its skin, eyes half-clouded. Then came the woman, older, sharp-faced, wrapped in faded gingham and meanness. She dismounted with the disjointed grace of someone used to stepping down into bad decisions. She barked at the shopkeeper, slapping a coin on the counter and asking for dried meat and whiskey. Behind her, still inside the wagon's mouth, sat a girl. No older than 20, barefoot, pregnant. One hand over her belly like she was holding something breakable inside. Her eyes didn't meet his. They stared at the ground, at the sun-whitened boards, at anywhere but him. "She ain't mine no more," the older woman said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I fed her. I dragged her halfway across this cursed land. But she's bred and broken now. I ain't carrying no useless mouth through the mountains." No one moved. A bottle shifted behind the counter. A cough. Then stillness. "I'm offering," the woman said, voice thick with self-satisfaction, "to let her go cheap." The rancher turned. The girl didn't flinch. Her expression wasn't desperate, wasn't even pleading, just blank, like she'd seen so much that fear had dried up inside her. He didn't ask questions, didn't look around for judgment. He stepped forward, reached into his coat, and placed 2 silver coins on the counter. Clean. Unspoken. Done. "She's yours," the woman smirked. "Like buying a mule with a kicked leg." The girl climbed down herself, slowly, carefully, one hand always on her belly. The mother didn't look back as she snapped the reins and the cart wheeled away, a trail of dust unraveling behind it like a ribbon of regret. He didn't offer his name. She didn't ask. They rode out together, her riding behind him on his aging mare, her arms loosely around his waist, but her body stiff as wood. The sun dipped fully then, painting the horizon blood orange, casting their figures in silhouette as they moved across the plains toward the ranch. The house sat alone, no neighbors for miles. The porch was half-rotted, the windows grime-streaked, but the roof held and the hearth never went cold. He dismounted first, then offered her a hand. She ignored it and stepped down herself. Her breath hitched, and he saw her lips pressed together as she fought back pain. Inside, she refused the bed, laid herself down near the stove, curling into herself like a dog settling for a warm patch of floor. He fetched her a blanket. She took it without a word. In the silence, he heard the crackle of the fire and the slow, irregular rhythm of her breathing. Night deepened. Wind pressed soft palms against the walls. Somewhere beyond the window, a coyote called out, a lonesome sound with no answer. In the morning, she wasn't in the house. He stepped outside, boots crunching on frostbitten grass. Found her by the well, kneeling, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing her arms raw with the cold water. Her breath rose in plumes. Her hair was wet. Her shoulders shook, but not from cold. He watched her, not out of pity, not curiosity, just the stillness of a man who had no right words to offer. She turned her head slowly and met his eyes. Whatever passed between them in that glance, grief, recognition, the weight of unwanted survival, it needed no language. She rose and wiped her arms on her dress. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. "I ain't asking for kindness." He nodded once. "I ain't offering any." Something like relief flickered across her face. Not comfort, not peace, but maybe something near respect. He turned and walked to the barn. She followed the creek's edge until the land swallowed her small figure. That night, he left a cup of warm milk on the table. She didn't drink it, but she moved from the floor to the cot. The next morning, he noticed her shoes by the door, cleaned, mended, lined with dry straw. That was how it began. Two people, ruined in different ways, building something wordless between them. Not trust. Not yet. Just space. A fragile ceasefire with the world. And the child inside her, unseen, unborn, grew. Each heartbeat inside her belly a slow drum, echoing louder with each silent hour. He couldn't hear it, but he felt it. In the air. In the way the wind carried through the kitchen. In the way the land, dry and used, seemed to lean closer to the house. He didn't know what kind of man he was anymore. But for the first time in years, he found himself lighting the lamp on the porch and letting it burn through the night. Morning crept in slow, brushing gold across the hills and laying a quiet hush over the land. Inside the ranch house, the air was heavy with wood smoke and simmering silence. She stood by the window, arms wrapped around her belly, watching the frost melt into dew on the fence rails. He sat across the room, boot knife in hand, working on a block of cedar, carving the shape of something he hadn't yet named. They had lived together for 2 weeks and barely spoken 10 sentences. Still, something had shifted. She took over the stove without asking, and he didn't correct her. He stopped counting how many steps she took during the day, no longer worried she'd disappear by dusk. He still kept the lamp burning at night. Her presence was like a stone dropped in water, quiet, but changing the shape of everything around it. One evening, she boiled mint leaves in a dented tin pot, the scent creeping through the house like a memory. She sipped slow and offered none, but left the pot on the stove. Later, after she'd gone to bed, he poured himself a cup and drank it without flinching. It tasted like bitter roots and something green trying to live. She started humming while sweeping the porch, low, drifting notes, wordless and worn, like a lullaby meant for someone long gone. He never asked about it. Instead, he found himself stepping outside more often just to hear it fade on the wind. The baby moved often now, and sometimes she would stop mid-chore, one hand pressing her side, eyes closing like she was listening to something deep within. Her silence wasn't just a shield, it was a language all its own. One morning, he found her in the back patch of the yard, crouched over the dirt. She was planting wildflower seeds she'd saved from her old dress hem. No ceremony, just careful hands pressing them into place like secrets. He stood watching from a distance, a faint grin pulling at the corner of his mouth before vanishing. Later that day, a letter arrived, curled and dusted with old road dirt. The name scratched on it hadn't been spoken aloud in years. His brother's name. He stared at the envelope a long while, thumb against the torn edge, then fed it to the stove without opening it. The flame flickered blue, then green, then was gone. She didn't ask what was inside. He didn't offer. That night, thunder rolled in from the west, dragging bruised clouds over the land. The house trembled as wind clawed at the shutters. She sat near the fire, both hands cradling her belly like a shield and a promise. He moved to the hearth without a word, adding a fresh log and stoking the flames. "You ever seen war?" she asked, voice hushed like it might break something. He nodded. "Buried it, too." She looked at him, then really looked. Her eyes held questions, but she let them settle back inside. She didn't need stories, just proof he'd survived his own ghosts. She told him only fragments of her past. A childhood carved by hunger. A mother whose love cost more than life could pay. A man with fast hands and a silver blade who never spoke kind unless it stung afterward. The baby, she said, was the only thing that hadn't lied to her. He listened, jaw tight, eyes on the fire. When she said nothing more, he simply muttered, "I don't believe folks are meant to start clean. Just better than before." Outside, rain started to fall in thick, rhythmic taps, each one like a nail driven into the roof by God's own hand. The storm pressed against the windows, wrapping the house in a womb of noise and flickering light. But inside it felt oddly still and safe. She began setting a place for him at the table. Just a fork and tin plate. No words. No invitation. One night he sat. And that was that. The land softened under spring's approach. The hard ground drank the rain, and green whispered up from cracks. The wildflower seed sprouted, tiny shoots reaching for sky. Her steps grew slower, her breaths deeper. He began fetching water, without being asked. She began letting him. In town, he bought her a jar of apple preserves and a book with torn corners. He didn't know what made him pick either, only that they seemed like things someone should have. He noticed her reading late into the night, lips moving along with the lines. Sometimes she laughed under her breath, and it startled him more than a gunshot might have. But peace was a thin skin stretched over the land, and nothing beautiful lasted without cost. The man rode in on a pale horse with a coat slick as bone. He wore dust like it was sewn into his skin, and when he dismounted outside the saloon, silence followed him like a loyal dog. His boots left red mud prints on the floorboards, his voice smooth as oil. "Girl with a belly," he told the bartender. "Skin like honey, eyes like nothing. She's mine." Ran off with a rancher who don't know what he's holding. He ordered no drink. He left no coin. Just scratched a line into the table with a silver-handled knife and walked out like he hadn't just turned a storm loose. Word traveled. Not fast, but faster than safety could grow. When the rancher rode into town 3 days later, the message was waiting. "She belongs to me." That night, a rabbit, neck snapped, eyes bulging, was nailed to the barn door. The girl found it first. She didn't scream. She only stared, lips pressed in, one hand tightening around her side. He came from the corral and saw her standing there. She turned her head slowly, gaze steady. "He's close," she said. He took the rabbit down and buried it near the fence line. Then he cleaned and loaded his rifle, oiling the parts with care, every movement precise and cold. Neither of them slept that night. The wind picked up again, dry and rust-colored, dragging whispers across the roof. The porch lamp burned until dawn. By morning, he'd boarded the windows. She watched from the doorway, arms crossed over the life inside her, and whispered, "It won't be the first time he's come for blood." He didn't answer, just nodded once, then returned to hammering. The fence creaked in the distance, and the land held its breath. The days stretched thin, taut as rawhide. Each hour carried its own weight, watching the horizon, listening for hoofbeats that hadn't come yet but felt etched into the future like a scar waiting to reopen. The girl walked slower now. Her steps had grown heavy, as though the earth itself was trying to hold her still. Her face stayed quiet, but the skin beneath her eyes deepened with sleeplessness, and her hands had started trembling when they thought no one was looking. He kept to the outer fields, rifle slung always over one shoulder, hat low against the sun. He fixed fence rails that weren't broken, checked the water troughs twice a day, built a second latch on the door, and planted thorn brush beneath the windows. He said nothing, but the air around him grew harder. The silence between them was no longer peaceful. It was cautious, braced like ribs before a punch. One evening, she joined him on the porch. Her belly strained against her dress, and her breathing had a rhythm he didn't like. Shallow, clipped. She sat slowly, wincing once, then leaned her head back and closed her eyes. He didn't ask how she was. She didn't volunteer, but she spoke eventually. "He's not the kind who fights fair," she said. "He don't come straight. He waits until something's already broke." He looked toward the fields, where the dusk curled soft and gold around the hay. "Then he'll be disappointed," he said. "There's not much left in me to break." She turned toward him, her eyes sharp but sad. "That's not true." The wind carried the scent of burned sage and dry dirt. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called. For a long while, neither of them moved. The light faded until their silhouettes blurred into the dark. That night, her labor started. It came in waves, sudden and cruel, curling her inward on herself like a storm knotting up in the belly of the sky. He woke to the sound of something shattering. Her glass cup had fallen as she clutched the edge of the table, her knees buckling. He was by her side in seconds, but she didn't want help, not at first. She pushed him away, teeth grit, breath coming short and fast. "Don't need pity," she growled. "Just space." But space wasn't enough. As the hours dragged forward, The pain grew meaner. Blood streaked the floorboards. She bit down on her sleeve until her mouth bled. He boiled water, tore linen into strips, and did the only thing he could. Stayed. When she cried out, he braced her shoulders. When she clenched her fists, he opened them. When she whispered, "Don't let him take it," he whispered back, "He won't." The birth came just past midnight, under a sky painted with stars sharp as broken glass. The child entered the world screaming, slick with life and the struggle that brought him. A boy. Strong lungs. Red face. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and eyes like storm clouds rolling in fast. She held the child with both hands, her chest heaving, a low sob escaping her throat. Not pain, not joy, but something between them. Something like survival finding a voice. He stood by the window, rifle close, eyes scanning the black. He arrived the next evening. Not on horseback, not with noise. The man came walking. Pale coat, silver knife swinging gently from his belt. His smile was wide and empty, like a cut that never healed right. He stood at the edge of the porch, dust settling at his feet, and looked up with the ease of someone who thought himself owed. Well now, the man drawled. "Ain't this a pretty picture? The whore and the hermit. How much did he pay for you, girl?" Inside, the baby stirred. She sat in the rocker, one hand on the rifle lying across her lap, the other curled around her son's back. The rancher stepped outside, closing the door behind him slow. "You're on land that don't welcome you," he said. The man chuckled. "That ain't never stopped me. I've taken what's mine in churches, courtrooms, and out of graves." "I ain't a grave yet," the rancher said. "But I could be. And I'd take you with me." The man's smile faded. His hand fell to the knife. "You think she chose you?" he spat. "She didn't. She ran because she's stupid and soft. She'll come back." Behind the door, she stood. The child, now wrapped snug, sat gently in a drawer lined with blankets. Her eyes locked on the shadows shifting outside the window. The rancher didn't blink. "She ain't yours. I branded her. Took her blood. That child got my eyes. He's mine by blood and law." "He's hers," the rancher said, voice low. "And she's no one's property." The man stepped up onto the porch. Fast. Knife out. But the door swung open. And she was there. Not cowering. Not hiding. She leveled a rifle at the man's chest, her fingers steady despite the exhaustion swimming beneath her skin. "I won't let him grow up afraid of you," she said. The man stared, then laughed. "You won't shoot me." She didn't. The rancher did. One clean shot, center chest. The echo cracked across the prairie like the sky itself had torn open. The man stumbled back, mouth open like he'd never been told no before. He hit the ground hard, gasping, silver knife still clutched in his dead hand. Silence fell again. A deeper silence. The kind that comes after something ends. The rancher lowered his gun. She didn't move. Not for a long time. Not until the wind shifted and the baby let out a soft, sighing cry from inside. She went to him. The rancher walked out to the body. He dug a hole by the creek, far from the house. Said no words. Left no marker. When he came back, the door was still open. She was by the cradle now, watching her son breathe. Their eyes met. No words passed. But something else did. A recognition. Not of love, not yet, but of something earned. The fence stood still under the dark. The night air smelled of powder and milk and spring. And inside the house, for the first time, nothing waited to break in. The seasons turned slow on the prairie, like an old song hummed under breath, notes trailing long between verses. Spring bled into summer, and summer cracked into drought. The child grew through it all, first swaddled in linen and silence, then crawling across floorboards smoothed by time and bare feet. His name was never spoken loud, but it rested in their chests like a secret prayer, shared, sacred, and unshakable. The woman, still unnamed by anyone but the land, moved with purpose now. Her body had mended, though some aches never left. She cooked, cleaned, and carved shapes from bits of leftover cedar. Tiny horses, tiny men. She placed them on the windowsill where the light could bless them. He watched her more openly now, unashamed of the way her presence filled the house, steady as a ticking clock. Some days, she sang again, not lullabies anymore, but strange old songs without words, heavy with longing. The rancher spoke more too, though not by much. He fixed the north fence, painted the porch rail, built a second cradle out of pine with notched edges and sanded corners. He took the boy on walks through the hills, carrying him in the sling she stitched from her old dress. They rarely went into town. When they did, folks stared, whispered, but said nothing to his face. He wasn't a man to challenge, not anymore. Still, something hung over him, a shadow that didn't stretch from the sun. One night, after putting the boy to sleep, she found him sitting alone outside, back against the porch post, eyes fixed on a horizon dark and endless. "You think more than you speak," she said, kneeling beside him. "Too much," he replied. "Tell me." He didn't look at her. He wasn't the only ghost, just the loudest. Her hand rested on his arm, featherlight. "You did what needed doing." "I did what I had to," he murmured, "but not what I wanted." She understood. Mercy was a choice that often felt like failure. But so was survival. Weeks passed. Crops began to fail under the heat, and the well dropped low. Coyotes came closer at night, bold enough to leave prints under the windows. He started sleeping near the front door, rifle always loaded, boots never quite taken off. She didn't argue. She simply left food near him and laid the child by her chest. Then one night they came. Not one, not two. A group. 5 riders in dark coats, faces masked in bandanas, soaked with dust and intent. They circled the house like vultures, slow and sure. No cries, no warnings, just the creak of leather and hooves on dry earth. The moon hung overhead, brittle and watching. She woke first, heard it in the silence that had suddenly deepened, slipped from bed and touched the rifle by the door. He was already there, crouched, breath shallow. "They want what he wanted," she whispered. He nodded once. "But they won't take it." He handed her a second rifle, one he hadn't used in years, oak-stocked, long-barreled, memory-worn. She checked the window, eyes cold. "We hold." And they did. The first shot shattered the barn window. The second pierced the porch rail. He returned fire, fast and clean. One rider dropped, his horse bucking hard and vanishing into the night. The others scattered, regrouped. She handed him bullets, calm as rain. Then she moved to the side door and fired twice. One round striking a rider in the leg. He screamed, thudded to the ground. The boy stirred inside, crying now, voice high and sharp. She ran to him, cradled him, sang through clenched teeth. Gunshots cracked behind her. 2 more riders fell before dawn. One limped away into the brush, bleeding and howling like a broken dog. The last one dropped his gun and raised his hands when the rancher stepped from the porch, barrel steady. "You can run," the rancher said, "or stay in the dirt with your kin." The man ran. Silence returned, sticky and stunned. The woman came outside, the child clutched close to her chest, wrapped in firelight and blood shadow. "They'll send more," she said. "Then we'll meet them," he replied. But something in his voice had changed. Not hard, not proud, just sure, rooted. They spent that day cleaning, burying, patching the barn. Neither wept, neither smiled, but a kind of peace settled between them. A bond born not of convenience or transaction, but battle. That evening, after the baby slept and the lanterns were low, she found him on the porch again. "I've been thinking," he said, without turning. "Dangerous thing," she replied, sitting beside him. "I want to name him." She blinked, then nodded. "What name?" He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since they met, his eyes weren't full of war. They were full of hope, scratched and scarred, but hope all the same. "Elias," he said. "It means Yahweh is my Lord. My mother's favorite name. Never gave it to anyone." She placed a hand over his. "Elias," she said softly. "He'll grow strong with that." The wind carried the scent of rain. Inside the cradle, Elias slept soundly, unaware that the land had shifted beneath him, that choices made in fire and blood had carved a future from ruin. Outside, the stars broke through the clouds one by one. The land, the house, the people in it, all had scars now. But scars, she knew, were proof something had healed. Something had been fought for. And no matter who came next, this place, this family, they would not break. They were built from grit and mercy, blood and kindness, silence and fire, and finally from love.